So I'm back out on another overcast day and I'm photographing trees, more tree trunks, just different textures and patterns. And what I love so much about doing this and why I've been doing it so much is each different tree that you find, depending on the species of the tree, how big the tree is, where the tree is, how old the tree is, each tree trunk is unique. And so you get all these different textures and patterns to play with. And I've been having a lot of fun just finding different trees and then shooting these kind of nice, almost like abstract painting style pictures of the different shapes that I can find. And I found a really cool one right here. And so here's one of the compositions. And I really liked these sort of twisty bits in here, how you get these zigzaggy lines that go through the composition. Of course, you're seeing the 16:9 crop. I'm probably going to end up cropping this maybe 8:10 or a square crop. And zooming out even, you still get those really nice shapes. So for settings here, I am on the 70-200 and I'm doing f16 and ISO 100, and then I'm about 1/3 of a second for my shutter speed. Now I'm doing f16 because I really don't want to focus stack this shot. I might end up having to focus stack this shot. So what I'm doing is I'm using my touch screen and I'm just focusing first on the center of the screen right here. We'll take a shot. Now I have it on a timer mode. And there we go, there's our first shot. And then I'm actually just moving my finger to the corners to make sure that all 4 corners of the shot are also in focus. But it's kind of just in case f16 isn't enough. So this tree texture shot turned out all right, but unfortunately this is another case of getting back to Lightroom and maybe realizing the composition wasn't quite as strong as I thought it was while I was out there shooting. But I kept playing around with this tree and a tree nearby, and here's what I shot. So here's one of the images that I quite liked. The colors here were really nice, these different warm tones, and the shapes here I thought were really fun, and that's what intrigued me out in field. And I feel like I can actually see an owl or 2 owls in this photograph, just made up by the texture of the wood. I'd be curious to know your thoughts. I mean, what do you see in this image when you look at it? Do you see an owl as well? Now, actually, I ended up having to focus stack these shots, and actually most of the shots that I took this day of these different textures ended up having to be focus stacked. So I'm really glad I took the extra frames that focused on the edges. Well, there's definitely not too many things I enjoy more than wandering around aimlessly with the camera. Just kind of cruising around, seeing if there's anything interesting to find. I think it's fun to plan things out. I think it's great to have a goal in mind, but my favorite shots always end up being the ones that are spontaneous, the ones that you just kind of stumble upon. Now, of course, you have to put yourself out there. You have to be there. You have to be out hiking around to find the stuff, but it's just always fun when you just kind of wander up onto a scene. And funny enough, right after ending that video, I actually stumbled upon a scene that I really liked.
Nature really did a wonderful job here, and all I had to do was point the 70 to 200 lens at it. So I decided to focus on this scene from a little bit of a distance with the 70 to 200, getting any closer and just added a bit of distortion. The roots didn't show quite as much, and I liked how you have the trees in the background that helped to keep the image a little bit more uniform. As I got closer and you could see the sky above the roots, it was just way too bright and added this unnecessary distraction to the composition. This image definitely sparked a lot of my imagination, I guess you could say. I kind of imagine a hobbit home when I look at this photograph, almost as if the cut down part of the trunk is like the hobbit home's door, and then just you have all this foliage surrounding it, and it's kind of dug into the hillside. But yeah, just a really fun image to stumble upon.
I always love finding stuff like this. Kind of knock down trees and then plants just kind of grow around it, and these vines are just sort of growing up this trunk, which is pretty cool. And actually, check this out. Ooh, look at these textures. See, that's absolutely gorgeous. Oh my gosh. I love how you can see some cracked textures in here, and then you've got these smoother textures that break it up with all these little lines in there, and then there's some bits of red as well. Well, I would say this is probably worth a photograph or two. So I'm gonna pull out the camera. Well, I guess I have the camera out, but I need to change the battery. And I don't know how to compose this necessarily. I'm definitely gonna use the 70 to 200. I'm probably gonna try a few different compositions of this. There's a lot to, this is actually an overwhelming tree. You know, I don't know. I mean, it looks cool. You know, I think at 70 millimeters, it's a little less interesting, but as I zoom in here, you can see some really interesting stuff in here. I don't know, like maybe something like that could be interesting. I kind of just have to play around a little bit, I think. Maybe get a little bit closer too. I think I should get closer, and then I see some patterns in here we could play around with. Because I think the closer you get to these patterns, just the more noticeable all the little textures become. Like the difference between the layers of bark really start coming out the closer you are. But I don't actually own a macro lens, or at least not while filming this, so gotta work with what I've got here.
So this is the first composition I shot of this tree texture, and I will say this is definitely my favorite tree that I found that day, and possibly out of all the times I've gone through Golden Gate Park. I mean, this was really a nice find. I went with a pretty simple composition here, just a nice diagonal wavy line that went through the image, separating the two different textures here and the different colors. And again, this was definitely one where I had to focus stack, so I took different focal points around the edges of the photograph and then made sure the middle was in focus as well. After taking this one, I got a little bit closer, and here's what I shot. I definitely like the look you get by going a little bit closer and getting a little bit macro. And I think at this point I almost wish I had a macro lens, but I don't actually own one, which is my mistake. And I think after shooting this video, I'm definitely going to go out, invest in a macro lens, and perhaps that'll be a new video for this channel. I went into this composition with a fairly similar mindset to the previous one, just kind of a nice diagonal pattern going from top left to bottom right that separates the two different textures. After playing around with these two diagonal compositions, I decided to play around with a few different shapes and patterns, and here are some of my favorite shots of this tree. So this image might be my favorite of this tree, and again, it's to that similar theme of this whole video, which has been just sparking my imagination. And in this photograph, these different patterns and textures to me kind of represent almost like a topo map. It feels like you're overlooking a topo map of a canyon or some sort of mountain range. And I had a lot of fun playing with the different pastel colors here. I really loved the blues mixed in with some of the warmer tones in the photograph. This is another image where I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts. What do you see when you look at this photograph? I know for myself, I saw kind of a topo map. I can also see some maybe fingerprints that are just kind of sprawled throughout this image. But what do you see when you look at this photograph? Let me know in the comments. So after shooting that tree, I roamed around for a little bit looking for some more compositions, and I actually found one that ended up being one of my favorite scenes of the day. The patterns of the branches of this tree were just absolutely spectacular, and I had a lot of fun playing around with this scene. The dappled light in the background I felt like really helped to spotlight the tree a bit, and then I accentuated that even further with a little bit of dodging and burning. So I shot this image that includes the trunk of the tree, and then I decided to zoom in a little bit and change my angle slightly so that I could just get the branches of the tree. And here's what I shot. So the scene definitely takes on a more abstract look as you lose that trunk of the tree with just having the branches and the foliage. I liked how the branches that were catching a little bit more light, a little bit brighter, almost made like an X shape through this image. And overall, just a really fun image to take. I really couldn't have asked for a better day photographing in the park and really just playing around with my imagination and seeing different patterns and shapes within the woods. And while I do love shooting sunsets and sunrises, I mean, they're so beautiful, it's hard not to enjoy them. I feel like sometimes with shoots like this, where I have a lot more time, I'm able to really be a lot more creative because I'm able to scout around, no pressure. You know, I could sit on the same tree trunk for an hour just playing around. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.